Dr. Yosef Alfredo Antonio Ben-Jochannan, 1918-2015. Dr. Yosef Alfredo Antonio Ben-Jochannan, affectionately known as Dr. Ben, was the premier multi-genius of our time, and as such, he cannot be defined nor scrutinized by Western academic standards, given the fact that he forever altered how classical African civilizations, in particular in the Nile Valley, are viewed, interpreted, studied in academia. Thus, Dr. Ben stands alone as he represents the ceiling in which we can rise to. We highly praise Dr. Ben for his great love of African humanity and the Nile Valley. Therefore, when it comes to the study and understanding of the Nile Valley, no one had a greater impact on the minds and hearts of African people at a global and grand scale than Dr. Ben. As an exceptional thinker and prolific writer, Dr. Ben's scholarship regarding the Nile Valley is not only exemplary, but unmatched, exceeding all others in terms of scholarly influence, community-based impact, and global outreach. As an authentic public intellectual and committed community activist, Dr. Ben skillfully integrated scholarship with service by bringing colleges to the communities and the communities to the colleges. By coalescing scholarship and service, Dr. Ben warmly embraced academia and activism as he cheerfully steered both colleges and the communities to the Nile Valley, where the God happy dwells. From this time forth to eternity, Dr. Ben is still teaching us, not at the colleges or in the communities, but over the ancestral arc, that we came from the beginning of the Nile, at the foothills of the mountains of the moon, where the God happy now dwells, this time with our beloved Dr. Ben. The statement was prepared by Professor Patrick Delices and Brother Reggie Mabry. And finally, let us hear from our beloved Dr. Ben in his own words. Thank you.
I think most people know very little about it. However, if you look at Africa from numerous ways in terms of the birthplace of civilization, one has to go back into archaeology, into anthropology, and then next into theology. In the case of anthropology, we would have the oldest known fossil human, Zinjanthropus boise, which will take us to at least 1.7 million years ago. That would mean approximately 1.7 million years before Adam and Eve. If we look into archaeology, we can go back into looking at the buildings such as the Step Pyramid of Saqqara, the places where the silt pyramids were first built, the movement of the Nile Valley in terms of the cataracts, and lastly, if we look from a theosophical point of view, we will have to go back into the teachings of the Africans and African gods and goddesses that predated Jehovah, Jesus, and Allah, and that would put us at least to the worship of Ta, P-T-A-H, subsequently the worship of Amen-Ra, A-M-E-N-R-A, and goddess Hathor, H-A-T-H-O-R, whom the Hebrews copied and called the golden calf and the golden this and that, the other thing. Well, the high culture started there with a group of people called the Twa and the Hutu, who brought down that Nile all the way from Ethiopia, and the Nile goes down north, not up. North is the low part of that area, and south is the high. So when you talk about Upper Egypt, you're talking about the southern part, and Lower Egypt is the northern part. So I want that to get clear. Okay. And the Blue Nile, the beginning of the Nile, is in Uganda, and the White Nile is in Ethiopia, and they join at a place called Khartoum in Sudan, then they meet at other body of water called the Atbara River, and then flow into the Kemet Sea, now called the Mediterranean. It is along that whole waterway that the indigenous Africans, you heard my term, indigenous, the people native to that land, started their high cultures, building their pyramids, building their other systems of worship and so forth, until they reached down to Egypt, where the zenith took place. Not where it began, but where it reached its zenith. And that, by that time that I'm talking about, there was no Adam and Eve yet. The story didn't exist because there was no Jew yet. Abraham wasn't born to start that story. There was no European history because Greece did not exist yet, the first of the European society. There was no Chinese history because this is the year 4700, or the year of the rooster. There wasn't a single society in human history in existence other than those African societies. To me, which was most important, the first time man established a set of moral values. This was, now I'm talking about 2785 BC.
Before Christ.
There was no Moses yet. Moses is not until 1346 BC. These Africans along the Nile gave to the world something called the Negative Confessions, 42 laws, in which the so-called 10 Commandments were already written. For example, it says, I have not killed man, woman, or child. I have not made light thy bushel. I have not spoken with a false tongue. This is there. Now, Moses isn't born in Africa, in Egypt yet. This is 2785. Moses is not until 1346. And now we hear something about Moses getting the 10 Commandments on Mount Sinai, the first time man heard laws. Moses himself, in that book, is said to be running from the Pharaoh, meaning Ramesses II, because he's supposed to have committed murder. And he didn't get the laws against murder yet. But somebody had a law against murder before Moses. And it is here, that was the most fundamental thing. A set of moral law, 42 of them. One for each nome. There were 42 states in Egypt. Each state was called a nome, N-O-M-E.
He let the god of the north be the first to be mentioned, and thus he made one god out of two, Amen-Ra. So the people in the north said, this must be a good man. He let our God be the first to be mentioned.
And all of this was devised in a place called Memphis.
Memnefa or Memphis.
Now, if we were to go to Memphis, what would we see today? Are there anything that's remnant of that period?
Very little. You will see some statues by Ramesses II, one at least about 40 feet, 30, 40 feet. Two in the yard, general yard, one of them having come to Tennessee when the Ramesses exhibit had come there, another one almost as large, and some other smaller statues. But the main buildings of the temple of god Ptah. Ptah was in the mythology the god who made gods, responsible for making gods.
The god of all gods.
The god of all gods. And you would see his, what's left of his temple, just sporadic pieces of foundation here and there. There isn't at least a quarter floor, or the height of a quarter floor, any place.
Was this done in Ramesses' lifetime?
The statue, yes.
It was.
Yes.
Did he order things like
you
this?
You know it is in his lifetime. Why?
Why?
Because he is standing on the left foot. Left foot forward. If he was standing this way, it would be, you know, he's dead.
He's dead when his feet are together.
But he's standing this way, he's alive.
Very near to Memphis is a place called Saqqara, where the world's first pyramid was built, although it was shaped somewhat differently. Dr. Ben showed us.
Did the Pharaoh design this pyramid and order its building, or did somebody else?
No. As a matter of fact, he had no business at all with it. The idea came from his prime minister, who was also an architect. As a matter of fact, he was a multi-genius, the first one recorded in all of human history. You got to consider we're talking about 2800 BC. This man called Imhotep, or for short, Imhotep. He didn't want his pharaoh to be buried like other pharaohs. He thought his pharaoh should be buried in a much more glorious state than the wood burial place that they had prior. So he decided, when looking around, I could use this material. It lasts forever. And thus he said, a stone, limestone, and says, I'm going to build it out of this. But they were building burial places out of this wood in a square. So he decided, well, look, I'll just use a stone or stones and the same procedure, and that will last. But when he was finished, he said, gee, it's going to last, but it looks like nothing. So he decided to put another layer on the top and recess them, set them back, and 6 of them set back, look something like wet cake. They become steps.
With the teachings of the Roman Catholic Church to practice slavery, is it not inconsistent with the teachings of the Muslim religion to engage in slavery?
Oh, yes.
Why not the Arabs?
And Christianity
Muslim?
and Judaism. But all of them engage in it. The grandees in Spain were predominantly Jews of Spain. Those that sold Isabella pawned her jewelry too. They financed the slave boats. They were involved in the financing of the slave boat. Some of them went and crew. Some of the conquistadores were equally Hebrews. After the Jews had become a part of the system, especially when the Moors were chased out, and so carried off to be slaves in the Caribbean. That started with a man called Bartholomew Las Casas, the Roman Catholic friar, that said after they'd done exterminated most of the Indians, or so-called Indians, the Caribs, then he said, bring us the Africans. Bring us those, especially in Spain, who refused to accept Christ. Imagine Bartholomew Las Casas speaking about accepting Christ. He forgot that Christianity started in Egypt with Pontius and Botus, not in Rome. It's a myth in that sense that people are trying to say, and there's no justification, no records, that the African was involved in the initial enslavement of itself. Number one, when you take the dates, the Arab enslavement of the African came around 638 of the Christian era, or 18 AH, 18 years after the Hijra, after Muhammad established Islam in the jihads, the holy wars. If someone could show me that an African state where slavery was practiced, when those forces came, then I will accept it. Nobody who said that about the African can point to you of one African state, one, a solitary one, where there was chattel slavery. Second, the slave trade of by the European, which started with Pope Martin of the Roman Catholic Church, when he unleashed the Knights of Genoa and the Knights of Malta and the African people. If they could show me an African state at that time, in 1501, 1506, that had slavery, chattel slavery, as what we're talking about, I will equally concede.
Did not the Moors carry out slavery in the southern portion of Europe, in Spain?
I mean, the Moors conquered Spain, but they never instituted chattel slavery.
How is it conceived? How do a people come upon the idea of enslaving another people?
Agreed. The enslavement doesn't come because you hate the people. You want their land. You want their natural resources. And in order to take them and control them, you must enslave them by one means or the other. Like the United States enslaved the Japanese for a little while until the Japanese was able to wingle a little trade. When I conquer you, you are my slaves. I make you do what I want.
That the Association for the Study of Classical African Civilizations, on the occasion of its 30th International Conference, recognizes and celebrates the life and work of Elder Dr. Yosef Antonio Alfredo Ben-Jochannan for his unyielding commitment to building for eternity. Give it up for the opener of the way.
85 years old. And now what more is there to do? All I can do is look at your beautiful papers and say, well done, well done.